Snapdragons are hardy annuals that are great at taking on the winter cold and producing strong spike flowers for the following spring. They can produce flowers all summer long through successional planting and cultivar selection. One of the elements I always like to include in my hand-tied bouquets is a spike, and Snapdragons are one of my favourites. They come in a variety of different colours and flower shapes, which makes them extremely usable in arrangements. I will let you in on my favourite varieties at the end of this video. I find autumn planting for spring flowers produces the best quality, strongest stems, whereas spring sowing for summer flowers tends to produce slightly weaker stems. Warm temperatures encourage quicker flowering, but stem length and strength is compromised. There are several different Snapdragon categories to consider when choosing the most suitable cultivar to grow. Firstly, there's the flower shape categories, which consist of traditional, azalea and open face varieties. Traditional cultivars include varieties like Potomac, Costa and Rocket, which have the typical Snapdragon look. Azalea varieties have a frillier appearance, double petals and include varieties like Madame Butterfly. Open face varieties like Chantilly are also frillier in appearance but have single petals and a more open bloom that bees have easier access to. Snapdragons are also categorised into 4 groups depending on the ideal flowering time for the cultivar. These groups serve as a rough guide, and some cultivars might appear in more than one group. Group 1 is best produced for harvest in early spring when short days mean less light and low temperatures. This includes Legend and Chantilly varieties. Group 2 is best produced for spring and autumn harvest when temperature and day length is still low but light is increasing. Group 2 includes the Costa and the Bridal varieties. Group 3 cultivars are more amenable to a range of conditions, so are suited to spring, summer and autumn production. They can tolerate medium day length, temperatures and light levels. Group 3 varieties include Costa, Opus and Potomac. Group 4 varieties are more suited to harvest in summer with long days, high light and warm temperatures. Potomac varieties fit well into Group 4. Here in the UK, I am growing in the equivalent of USDA Zone 8, and I like to sow my Snapdragon seeds in late August and early September for planting in the field and overwintering. Or I like to sow them in early spring 8 to 10 weeks before my last frost. Snapdragon seeds are tiny, and I place them on top of my compost with no additional covering of soil or vermiculite, as the seeds need light to germinate. Seeds usually take 7 to 14 days to germinate at 21 degrees and are quite slow to grow initially. If autumn sowing, I like to get them in the ground 8 to 10 weeks after sowing or 6 weeks before the first frost, so they can get the roots down before winter. They do well in both soil blocks and in cell trays. I plant Snapdragons at 9-inch spacing, and I pinch the stems down to 2 sets of true leaves on the plant to create a multi-stemmed plant that can produce 7 to 10 flower spikes. Pinching the plants delays flowering by a few weeks, so if you want to create more of a succession, you can pinch some and leave some. If you are planting Snapdragons in an exposed location, it is advisable to use plant support netting. I've made this mistake loads of times and I've had lots of Snapdragons that have been unusable. Harvest Snapdragons when 1/3 to half of the blooms are open, cut the stems near the base of the plant and place upright in a bucket. It might be helpful to either wrap the stems in paper or place a mesh or a tape grid on a bucket to allow the stems to stand upright. Snapdragons are geotropic, which means they adjust their position according to gravity. If stems are leaning over in a bucket, they will try to straighten themselves out and cause wonky stems. This cannot be rectified once the stem has taken shape. Like all cut flowers, it's best to cut in the cool of the morning or in the evening, cutting straight into cool water and keeping the bucket in the shade. My favourite varieties include Potomac Dark Orange, Potomac Dark Pink, Potomac Lavender, Costa Apricot, Madame Butterfly Bronze and Costa Silver. Thank you for watching this video on how to grow Snapdragons. I hope you found it helpful and informative. If you have any questions, pop them down in the comments box below, and I would love it if you would share your favourite Snapdragon varieties too.